6th of the dusk, but 1st of my heart. Yeah, guys, this one was good. Secret Project 5, Isles of the Emberdark, and the conclusion of the Words of Radiance crowdfunding campaign is now available for everyone! I took my time reading it, which I know as a content creator is kinda counterproductive, but I wanted to just relax and enjoy it. And boy did I! Isles of the Emberdark is set in the far future of the Cosmere, further than anything else we've gotten so far, including Tress and Yumi. It follows the stories of Dusk, a trapper on the dangerous jungle island of Patji, and Starling, a dragon from Yolen currently fire-flying through the expanding Cosmere. No spoilers, yet, but this book was awesome. Perhaps not my favorite of the secret projects, as my opinion of Tress is incredibly high, but it's a solid contender. The pacing of the novel is excellent. Jumping back and forth between the two main characters didn't take me out of the story at all. In fact, being able to predict how they were eventually going to meet up, because if you've got two main characters, that's honestly a Chekhov's gun for structure, was pretty fun. The arcs of both Dusk and Starling were delightful as well. Seeing how these two characters grow in very different ways, face challenges that require shifts in thinking, and eventually I feel like worked really well. Almost foils to each other given their personalities, but fundamentally seeking the same thing, and finding it in very different ways. They both felt really distinct. In fact, all of the characters did. Each person on the ship, side character, heck, even the birds each had their own clear personality and motivations. The ensemble worked really well in this book. I know Sanderson likes happy endings, and especially with how the Cosmere functions, I feel like we can generally expect some sort of everything works out against all odds type of thing, though I will say some of the aspects of this book felt a little convenient for me. Perhaps that just means there's information I'm missing about what's going on behind the scenes, but we'll talk about it in the second half of the video. All in all, though, I thoroughly enjoyed this foray into the space age of the Cosmere, and I can't wait for Brandon to follow through on some of the promises he made, or at least some of the hints he dropped in, 20 years. Journey before destination, I know, but the journey is so long! Secret Project 5, Isles of the Emberdark, solid 4 out of 5 stars. Probably not a great first place to start in the Cosmere, or even a middling place to continue, but if you've read most of everything else, it'll pique your curiosity something fierce. Like a death ant. Now, before we get to spoilers, I need to say thank you to the folks that make this channel possible, and if you like my videos or find them useful, considering joining the fantastic folks of my Patreon. Particularly Doug, Data Gremlin, Craig, James, Dalinar's Butt, Moochie, Chris, Meethy Carone, Gallant Aegis, the son of James, Lexar Talap, 42, Windcaller, Destroy Evil, Shardcore, and Revelry Play. Special shout out to James, and by extension the son of, for sponsoring my booth at Dragonsteel this year. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. If you aren't able to join my Patreon right now, you can always at least join the Raffo Discord. We've got a bunch of good folk there, and we'd love to have you. Now, let's slather ourselves in worm juice and jump into the unsea, 'cause here there be spoilers. And dragons. Oh, yeah, goodness, here there be dragons! 3 dragons, to be exact. Starling, aka Illistandrista, is Frost's niece. Something happened to her parents that we don't know, and she did something to save someone's life that went against the will of her draconic elders? So she's shackled into human form. Still so many questions about that. But with her as a main character, we learn so much about dragons! They're basically impervious to damage, are capital C connected to, everything, which is why Tamu Keks work, and are so incredibly invested that when they die, it takes millennia for their souls to fade into the beyond. So instead, they just go hang out on a spiritual beach and think deep thoughts. We also meet Zysis Refliel again, this time in human form. So what if Jeff Bezos was a dragon? I mean, more than just hoarding wealth and exploiting humanity for personal gain. He also plays piano very well, and looks darn good in a suit. And then there's Frost, who may or may not be dead at this point. He wasn't on the Spirit Beach, and Hoyd thinks he's still around somewhere. For being strictly a non-interventionist, I guess he didn't intervene in Kakoban's death, because he was late. But how'd they get together? And where are the Dromanadians originally from? They've been on First of the Sun for a few thousand years, which puts their arrival possibly around the Lord Ruler's ascension on Scadrial? I don't know, it seems like I need to do another updated timeline video. But we've seen functional AVR in Stormlight, which would have had to have been taken from Patji, and that's potentially 1,000 to 2,000 years before 6th. But then again, in both Emberdark and Sunlit Man, people refer to the Shattering as happening 10,000 years ago, but we know that by the beginning of Stormlight that Roshar is probably only around 12,000 years old, which means that maybe all this future stuff is closer than we think. But then again, in the Cosmere 3.0 timeline, Beskar Kalmerk, he speculates with sources that Emberdark likely takes place almost 16,000 Cosmere standard years before the Shattering, so maybe people are just saying 10,000 just as a general been a really long time type of number and not an accurate generalization, and that's even if accurate generalization is even a thing that's possible. And plus, there's time dilation to consider with Roshar, and that shouldn't have too much of an effect, given that it's just a few decades, but maybe there's other time dilation happening? I mean, talk about Silverlight. Silverlight! There's another awesome thing we get to see for the first time, with extrapolated explanation as to how Chris has been alive for so long without actually being immortal. But we're veering off of a review. I'll do a Cosmere Connections video on Emberdark that will dive deep into all of this. I had a blast trying to find all the tidbits that Brandon seeded in about the now in-betweenness of the Cosmere. Is it still future if we have 4 books there already? The development of the Malwish into space superpowers with expandable metal masks who are at war with Roshar, where Skybreakers at least must still exist, in interstellar space-capable shard plate and shard railguns, the integration of all the different types of invested technology like Aether Spore propulsion, Rosharan anti-grav tech, Scadrian starfighters and their steel fields for maneuverability, it's gonna be really cool. Plus, we got more info on the Grand Apparatus, which is apparently run by the Sleepless and houses the entire Lonarch human subspecies. Honestly, it's the reason why I loved Era 2 of Mistborn so much. Seeing how their world and society evolved with the magic systems, except now it's over multiple planets and peoples. There were some things that felt kinda off to me. The convenience of the Cave of Death being populated with Popji flora and fauna before Dusk's arrival, the crew of the Dynamic Storyteller's incredible conveyance having exactly the right skills / backstory to get safely off the island, and I'm still confused at how Dromonad navigators are different than Allomantic Bronze Seekers. What makes feeling the knell different than sensing other investiture? And why would the death of ambition have anything to do with people living near a perpendicularity, presumably tied to autonomy? And what's up with Pachi? Is the island itself really somehow an avatar? An invested chunk of the landscape? Why doesn't eating the worms that the Aviar eat grant talents to humans, but eating worm paste sparked Dusk's ability? Either way, it was really fun to read. I honestly expected it to have more spectacle than it did. Dusk only made it to one island, and his entire stay there was, a few days? Only one Isle of the Emberdark. It was full of some of my favorite fantasy tropes. Ragtag band of misfits creating a found family, fighting against a militaristic empire, empowering natives towards independence, plus giant ghost snakes. Hey. We'll talk about artwork and such when I finally get my copy. Fulfillment stalled since everyone went to Spain. But official release of the Stormlight RPG just happened, and what I've seen of that stuff is incredible. In fact, I was in an actual play video of the Speak the Words one-shot with a bunch of other Cosmere content creators highlighting the Cosmere RPG on Foundry, and it was a blast. Check it out right here on the official Brotherwise account. Otherwise, there's a ton of lore and pretty pictures in that world guide, and I need to read and find out. Hoyd's married? And maybe has kids?